Look me in the eyes and say that again, Garrick. You honestly sat in front of state troopers and told them I was the one driving my car downtown at midnight, while you knew damn well I was checked into an airport hotel 3 miles away. You had the keys to my car, Garrick. You looked at a team of detectives and handed them a pre-written obituary for my freedom just to save your own skin.
Sloane, please lower your voice. The lawyers are listening. I didn't want to tell them, but your car was at the scene. Your father's blood is on the bumper, and they found your house keys in the ignition. I had to protect myself from being dragged into your mess.
And that was the exact moment the floor dissolved beneath my feet, listening to the man who had promised to love me forever smoothly negotiate the price of my life. I spent 3 years building a life with Garrick Vane, thinking his perfection was a gift, never realizing it was a carefully calibrated mask designed to hide a monster. But before I take you inside the cold interrogation room where his elaborate frame job began to choke me, kindly hit that subscribe button. The harsh fluorescent lights of the airport terminal didn't feel real. 1 minute I was standing in line at gate 14, coffee in hand, preparing for a routine software tech convention in Chicago. The next, 3 heavy-set men in tactical vests were pinning my arms behind my back, the cold steel of handcuffs biting into my wrists in front of 100 staring passengers. They didn't tell me I was a suspect in a homicide. They just told me my custom sports sedan had been found wrapped around a light pole on 4th Street, and a man was dead on the asphalt. Sloane, baby, just cooperate with them, Garrick had sobbed when he arrived at the precinct, his eyes red and his designer suit artfully rumpled to look like a man who hadn't slept. He looked completely devastated, a masterpiece of public grief. He squeezed my trembling hands across the metal table, his voice a frantic whisper. I told them we had a massive fight last night. I told them you snapped, took the keys, and drove off into the storm. It's better if we play the temporary insanity angle, Sloane. If you confess now, the judge will be lenient. I stared at him, the noise of the busy bullpen fading into a high-pitched ring. I am an automotive firmware engineer. My entire brain is wired to process data, logic, and cold, unyielding facts, and the facts sitting in front of me weren't adding up. A fight, I whispered, my voice sounding hollow in the small room. Garrick, we didn't fight. I took an Uber to the airport hotel at 8:00 p.m. because my flight was at dawn. You stayed behind to finish the quarterly financial audits for my family's trust fund. Sloane, you're confusing yourself because of the trauma, he said, his hand sliding up to squeeze my neck in a gesture that looked like comfort to the detectives watching through the two-way mirror, but felt like a chokehold to me. The dash cam in your car has been glitching for months, the police checked, and the SD card was completely blank. There's no proof of where you were, just take the plea. For the sake of our future, just take the plea. He stood there, stroking my hair and begging me to sign my own confession, completely unaware that while he spent the night erasing the main memory card, he had forgotten one crucial detail. I don't write software that lets a killer cover his tracks. The bail was set at an impossible $500,000, a calculated number Garrick knew would drain my liquid savings. When I finally walked out of the county jail under a gray, drizzling sky, he was waiting by his pristine luxury SUV, holding a travel mug of exactly how I take my coffee, 2 sugars, oat milk. It was terrifying how normal he looked, like a supportive boyfriend picked from a catalog, while my entire world was bleeding out on the pavement. I talked to the bondsman, Sloane, he whispered as he pulled into the suburban traffic, his voice thick with a forced, breathless panic. He reached over to squeeze my knee, his palm hot through my jeans. Your father's assets are frozen during the investigation. The bank is looking at the trust fund transfers, and the detectives think you did this for the inheritance money. They think you ran Malone down to get to the estate. Garrick, I didn't touch that car, I said, staring at the rhythmic sweep of the windshield wipers. The smell of his expensive sandalwood cologne in the enclosed space was suddenly making me physically sick. My father was trying to reach me all week. He said he found an anomaly in the trust's ledger. He was supposed to meet me at the hotel. "Sloane, listen to me," he said, pulling over violently into an empty grocery store parking lot. He turned to face me, his eyes wide, boring into mine with a look of frantic, desperate pity. "You're having a breakdown, you're projecting. You hated how distant he was, and you snapped. If you keep pushing this alibi story, they will give you the maximum sentence. I am the only one standing between you and a concrete cell. Let me handle the lawyers. Just stay quiet." He sat under the buzzing parking lot lights, painting me as a lunatic to my own face, never realizing that a data engineer doesn't panic when the system glitches. She searches for the root code. The impound yard smelled of rusted iron, burnt rubber, and old rain. I didn't care about the midnight curfew or the terms of my bond. I paid a crooked night guard $300 in crumpled 20s just to give me 10 minutes with my locked sports sedan. When the beam of my flashlight hit the front bumper, my breath hitched. The driver's side fender was crumpled like tin foil, stained with a dark, dried rust that used to be my father's blood. Garrick had been clever. He had pulled the primary microSD card from the dashcam, leaving the system looking completely unindexed and blank to the police tech unit. But Garrick was an investment guy. He understood markets, not code. My fingers were trembling as I popped off the plastic housing underneath the rearview mirror. I bypassed the main slot and used a precision sewing pin to press into the hidden recessed release valve on the side of the motherboard. With a tiny click, a secondary, unlisted black chip slid out into my palm. It was the factory diagnostic partition, a fail-safe firmware layer I had programmed myself for the manufacturer 3 years ago. It recorded continuously to an embedded flash drive, completely independent of user control, capturing raw telematics and audio files directly from the vehicle's internal network. As I slipped the tiny card into my boot lining, I heard the guard's boots crunching on the gravel outside. "Time's up, lady. Cops are cruising the perimeter." I locked the door and slid into the shadows, gripping that piece of plastic against my chest. It was no longer just a piece of storage. It was the digital heart of the man who had murdered my father, and I was about to extract the truth. My apartment felt like a tomb. I sat on the kitchen floor with my laptop, the screen illuminating the dark room in a pale, cold blue. I jammed the diagnostic card into the reader, my mouse hovering over the encrypted raw media partition. The file size was massive. The timestamp read exactly 11:42 p.m. on the night of the collision. The video file opened, and the audio hit my speakers first. It wasn't the sound of a roaring engine or a panicked driver. It was Garrick's voice. He was listening to a smooth jazz playlist, humming along to the melody as the headlights swept over the rain-slicked pavement of 4th Street. Then, a figure appeared in the high beams. It was my father, Malone, holding a tan leather briefcase, squinting against the glare as he stepped off the curb toward the airport hotel. "Sloane will never see the ledger, old man," Garrick muttered to himself. The audio caught the sudden, violent click of his seatbelt locking as he slammed his foot onto the accelerator. The camera didn't blink. The car surged forward, the engine roaring as the tachometer pinned into the red. My father turned, his eyes wide in the headlights, realizing too late that the car belonged to his daughter. The impact was a sickening, metallic crunch that shook the camera frame. The briefcase flew over the hood, scattering financial documents into the dark air like white confetti. Garrick didn't slam the brakes. He checked his rearview mirror, adjusted his tie in the reflection of the dashboard light, and calmly turned the music back up. I watched my father's final seconds play out in high definition, staring at the face of the man I had loved, now looking at a killer who used my own car as his execution block. Courtroom 3B was packed with local reporters and my father's old business partners. Garrick sat in the second row of the gallery, wearing a somber charcoal suit, a black armband pinned to his sleeve. He kept wiping his eyes with a handkerchief, playing the role of the tragic, loyal boyfriend to perfection for the cameras streaming the arraignment live to the local news network. The prosecutor stood up, clearing his throat. "Your Honor, the state presents the vehicle damage report and the defendant's own vehicle logs, which show no recording data from the night in question, supporting the theory of an intentional cover-up." "If it pleases the court," I said, standing up from the defense table before my lawyer could stop me. I didn't look at the judge. I looked directly at Garrick. He gave me a tiny, warning shake of his head, his final attempt to gaslight me into silence. I bypassed the court's presentation laptop and plugged my own encrypted drive directly into the master AV media feed on the wall. The defense moves to introduce a certified factory diagnostic ledger. Let's look at what the car actually saw. The massive wall monitors flickered. The entire courtroom went dead silent as Garrick's humming filled the speakers. Then came the high beams. The impact played on a 20-foot loop, his face perfectly illuminated by the dashboard display as he steered directly into my father's body. Garrick stood up, his face turning a horrific, mottled purple as he lunged toward the bar. "That's a fabrication. She's a software hacker. She forged the data." "It's time-stamped by the satellite network, Garrick," I shouted over the sudden eruption of the gallery. "You didn't just kill my father. You left your own voice signature on the murder weapon." The sound of the judge's gavel banging was completely drowned out by the chaos. State troopers descended on the gallery, tackling Garrick to the hardwood floor right in front of the live-streaming news cameras. His perfect hair was messed up, his designer suit torn at the shoulder as the handcuffs clicked into place around his wrists. He looked small, pathetic, and utterly ruined. But I wasn't done. While he was being dragged down the center aisle, my legal team was already filing the secondary civil injunctions. Using the decryption keys I'd recovered from his laptop while he was at my father's funeral, we unlocked his offshore dummy corporations, revealing the entire $8 million embezzlement scheme to the federal regulators in real time. By the time the sun set over the city, Garrick wasn't just facing a murder charge. He was completely bankrupt, his assets seized, his reputation incinerated on every national news outlet. I walked out of the courthouse alone, the rain finally stopping as the cold wind hit my face. I had saved my freedom, and I had given my father justice. But as I looked down at my hands, I realized the data couldn't fix everything. The code could expose a liar, but it couldn't erase the memory of the 3 years I spent sharing a bed with a ghost who was planning a funeral. Garrick thought he could delete his way out of a crime, but in my world, every system leaves a shadow, and his shadow just cost him the rest of his life. The sports sedan was crushed for scrap metal the following week. I never wanted to see that dashboard again, but the lesson remained: never trust a man who smiles too perfectly in the dark. A delete button can wipe a memory card, but it can never erase the truth. We are exposing the terrifying sociopaths hiding behind perfect smiles, one chapter at a time. If you believe that narcissistic scammers like Garrick should always be exposed and humiliated, hit that subscribe button. See you on the next one.